Kit Harington wasn't the only member of the Game of Thrones cast who auditioned to play Jon Snow. In fact, before Harington got the role, 3 of the HBO series stars tried out for Jon, and although 2 of them are incredibly difficult to imagine as the character, there's one I really see the vision for. Jon Snow is one of the most important characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, and thus, Game of Thrones, so it's no surprise many actors were vying for the part when the TV series started casting. Of course, Harington came to define the role, ensuring it'd be impossible to envision anyone else as Jon in hindsight. Harington brought just the right amount of brooding, compassion, and charm to Jon's character, adapting him from the Song of Ice and Fire books well. It's lucky that he landed the role, even if several other Game of Thrones cast members aimed for it. 2 of them went on to play characters at odds with Jon, but one would actually have been a promising choice to play him. 3 Game of Thrones stars auditioned for Jon Snow before Kit Harington got the role. Ewan Ryan, Alfie Allen, and Joe Dempsey tried out for the character. Jon Snow, Kit Harington, looking serious in Game of Thrones. A number of Game of Thrones actors auditioned for roles other than the ones they got, with Carice Van Houten trying out for Cersei Lannister before snagging Melisandre and Natalie Dormer aiming for the Red Woman before landing on Margaery Tyrell. But besides Harington, 3 of the HBO show stars wanted to play Jon: Ewan Ryan, Alfie Allen, and Joe Dempsey. Clearly, their auditions were promising enough that the casting directors kept them around. However, all 3 wound up playing different characters, 2 of whom were a far cry from Jon Snow. Ryan eventually played one of Jon Snow's biggest enemies, Ramsay Bolton. And Allen also found himself at odds with Jon as the series continued, as his character, Theon Greyjoy, betrayed the Starks and had to regain their trust. Joe Dempsey had a few interactions with Jon while portraying Gendry, and he held the most similar role personality-wise. After watching all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, it's not easy to imagine any of them as Jon. But while Ryan and Allen feel better equipped for more morally dubious roles, I see the vision for Dempsey. It's hard to imagine Ewan Ryan or Alfie Allen as Jon after their Game of Thrones performances. Their time as Ramsay and Theon showed a totally different side of them. With Ryan and Allen playing Ramsay and Theon, respectively, it's difficult to see them capturing Jon's humble and compassionate personality, even if both actors likely have the range to. Ryan was iconic as Ramsay Bolton, one of the few clear-cut villains to show up in Game of Thrones. His gleeful cruelty and barely repressed rage are conveyed impressively, but they don't fit with Jon's characterization. Ryan even told Interview that there would have been a very different Jon Snow if he'd played the character, so it's probably for the best the casting directors made the choices they did. Allen feels more similar to Jon by the end of Game of Thrones, after he finds his honor, but Theon's character falls into extremes that also don't really work for Jon either. At the beginning of Game of Thrones, Allen leans into Theon's cocky and entitled nature. However, he takes a sharp turn after his character is captured by Ramsay, becoming fearful and servile. Allen's range suggests he could have played Jon, but his portrayal of Theon doesn't reveal what that would have looked like. Dempsey, on the other hand, exhibits his qualifications for playing Jon, even as Gendry. Joe Dempsey would have made a great Jon Snow, but Kit Harington defined the role. He mastered many of the character's qualities as Gendry. Gendry from Game of Thrones. As hard as it is to see the vision for Ryan or Allen as Jon Snow, I can totally see Dempsey portraying the character, probably because he exhibits many of Jon's traits as Gendry. Gendry is often brooding and frustrated by his circumstances, but he also showcases moments of loyalty and bravery that would make Jon proud. He's competent when he needs to be, but he also has trouble navigating power dynamics and social situations. Dempsey conveys all of this expertly, meaning he'd be a shoo-in for Jon Snow. However, it's for the best that Harington ended up playing the character in Game of Thrones, as he defined him in many great ways. And Dempsey is just as compelling as Gendry, even if it means we see less of him throughout the series. They fell into their final roles seamlessly, ensuring the HBO show's cast went down as one of the best in television history.